There are techniques to strategic thinking and strategic planning. These techniques, although they may sound cumbersome when you actually begin to write them down and to build them, it's like using Lincoln log cabins. Lincoln logs rather, and you actually build something. It builds up, and you will see how this works as I discuss it. As I said, we have a vision, and from that vision to be realized, we have to have certain goals. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example, and you can use yourself or your business any way you wish to use the same system. I have asked my learners in my classroom to write a strategic plan to turn a national organization with 25 offices across the country into a learning organization. Right? And so they have to know what a learning organization is, and you will, because I'm going to tell you later, and they have to know how to do strategic planning. And so they bring the two together. That's their final exam. They've got 3 or 4 weeks to do it, and that's the way we work it. All right, but I'm going to use myself as an example because I know me. All right? I have a small farm. My wife and I should say, have a small farm in Tennessee. Now, I have this vision. I have this vision of a healthy Bill McConkey working on his farm with his sheep and his goats and a steer or two and a vineyard and a large garden and an orchard and a large bramble patch with blackberries, blueberries, raspberries. And I'm taking care of that. And I'm raising some rabbits and some chickens. And I am making in a shed which is already built specialty foods. I'm making a specialty line of dog food that is totally 100% organic and healthy. I'm making jams and jellies. We are making wine out of our grapes. This is my vision. Bill McConkey is a healthy and happy farmer. He's also debt-free except for what he still owes on his mortgage. Right? And he's continuing to learn. His brain is being pushed to continue to function. Your brain is a lot like your muscles. You don't use them, it starts to deteriorate, especially when we get a little older. So that's my vision. I'm a healthy, happy farmer. Oh, I forgot. And I'm still teaching. I'm teaching online. Right? And I'm giving speeches. And I'm writing books. So I'm doing all these things. That's my vision. So to do that, I have to have certain goals. Well, you remember what my vision said? A healthy Bill McConkey. So I have a goal that I specifically write down. I am going to be medically, physically, mentally, spiritually happy. That's goal 1. I mentioned that I was going to be out of debt. That's goal 2. I mentioned that my farm was going to be working. That's goal 3. I mentioned that I was going to continue my intellectual world by reading, studying, learning, and teaching. That's goal 4. Now those are pretty admirable goals. And for a man who's 70 years old, those are big, hairy, audacious goals. Right? Now, I've got a vision and I've got a goal. We'll take one of these goals and look at it. We'll take this healthy goal. How do I know if I'm healthy? How do I measure that, by the way? Well, I can measure my weight. I can measure my blood pressure. I can measure my blood sugar. I can measure my cholesterol. I can measure how far I can walk up the hills of my farm without stopping, trying to catch my breath. I can measure how many feed sacks I can lift before I get tired, how many logs I can carry before I get tired. I can measure my health. All right? So I have a goal to be healthy, and I have ways of measuring it. So I set objectives. Now, an objective is different than a goal. A goal really doesn't have a number attached to it. If I say I want to be healthy, I can't put a 1 there. I could make up something. I could say, well, 100 means I'm healthy. But it's not measuring anything. Individual objectives must be measurable. Right? So let's take the weight thing. I want to get to a weight that I have picked, and I want to get there and I want to maintain it. And let's say that weight is what I weighed when I graduated from college. That would be about 185 pounds. Oh, goodness. That means I got to lose a lot of weight. Staring into this camera and talking right now, I weigh 235. So that's 50 pounds I've got to lose. Now I've lost 55 in the last 9 months, so maybe I can lose another 50. Right? But you see, I have a measurement now. Whether it's realistic or not is up to me. Maybe I could say only maybe I should just weigh 200. Or back in the 1980s when I was boxing in the ring, as a fighter, I weighed 225. So let's just say 225. Whatever number I pick, I have an objective that I can measure. Well, it still doesn't mean anything. It's just sitting there. How do I make that something real? Well, I put milestones under it. If I weigh 235, one milestone then is 230. 230 for a week straight. Then the next milestone would be 225. For a week straight, I weigh 225. Next milestone will be 220. And I move it down in 5-pound increments. You see, I have a measurable objective. And your bosses, your CEOs are going to want to see measurable objectives, and they're going to want to see them accomplished. They want to see those milestones that are being met. But you know what? I'm going to tell you something about the difference between good leaders and great leaders. Good leaders have a vision. Great leaders have a vision, but they got a deadline that goes with it. And so these milestones that you're reaching to meet your objectives have got dates there. If I'm going to go from 235 to 230, and that 230 is going to hold for a week, when am I going to do that? What's the date of that week? Well, I'll say it's April 20 through 27. I'll just pick that. For that week, I'm going to hold this weight at 230. See, now I have a milestone. And I can chart my progress. Right? There are charts up there where we measure our progress on our objectives, our milestones, and our deadlines. If you're going to grow your market, where? Well, we're going to open up in St. Louis. We have nothing there. We're going to open up in the St. Louis market. Well, that's okay. That's just money going out. For what purpose? We will open the St. Louis market and we will be selling $2 million there at the end of the first calendar year. All right, that is a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's a good objective to go after. Now, what are the milestones and the deadlines that get you there? Because I'm your CEO and I'm going to watch those. And so I can do that with my blood pressure. I can do that with cholesterol. I can do that with blood sugar. I take my blood sugar test every morning. I have an objective. I have a milestone every morning before noon, right? Every morning before noon, I will take my blood sugar test. And I have an objective. I'm going to keep that down there. at 100 or below if I can. I haven't yet. One day I think I got it down to 97. But generally it's somewhere between 103 and 110, which is okay. Right? But it's measurable. If you have an objective that you can't measure, it's not any good. I'll tell you how we say it. If you can't count it, it doesn't count. And that objective to reach that goal must be measurable, and it has milestones with deadlines, and they are measurable. They can be counted. Right? I want to be out of debt. I say, well, I know how much I owe. With the exception of my mortgage, I want to be debt-free. So I know how much I owe on credit cards that are mine and how much I owe on credit cards that are my wife's. And I want to get rid of those amounts. And I set it up there. That's my goal. That's my objective, and I got milestones. Pay them down this much every month until they're gone. I want to keep working with my brain. How I want to do that? Well, I want to take a class. Set the objective. I'm going to renew my mediation license in Tennessee, which means I've got to take 8 hours of continuing education. Pick the course, set the date, check it off. It's measurable. Strategic planning means that you have a vision, a goal, several goals to make that vision happen. You have measurable objectives. You have measurable milestones under those objectives with deadlines. That's your plan. Now, attached to that is a tactical plan. Your strategic plan tells you what you want to accomplish and by when. So now you write a tactical plan. You write it out in a paragraph form if you want and say, here's how I'm going to do that. How am I going to lose that weight? How am I going to open that market? How am I going to reduce that debt? Right? That's where you think even harder and begin to write actual operational steps. The steps you take to make it happen. That's leadership thinking. It's a vision with a deadline. That's how leaders think. In my classes, I tell my learners, you notice sometimes I slip. But you notice I call the people in my classrooms learners instead of students? I try to do that. Sometimes I slip to the old way. But I believe they're learning. Now, I'm so vain. My vanity, I have told other people that my vanity is only exceeded by those who sit in the U.S. Senate. I'm so vain that I believe if you come to my classes and listen, you've got to learn something. All right? I tell my students one of their assignments is to look at their life and to write a plan for themselves for 20 years. A vision with goals, objectives, milestones, and deadlines. Right? What do you want to be personally, professionally, and intellectually? I add the intellectually part because if you're going to advance yourself professionally, you've got to continue to learn. So I say, there you go. Write a strategic plan for yourself. A vision, goals, objectives, milestones, deadlines. They love it. I have students tell me, I have learners, I'm trying to say learners. I have learners tell me, man, I love this project. I hadn't done that before. It cleared my mind, made me think harder about what I want to do. And so that's what I'm talking to you about. What do you want to do with your company? Can you really put together some goals, some objectives, some milestones, some deadlines, and then some tactics to describe how you're actually going to do that. Now you also have to think about the budget. There's a way to think about budgets. And I encourage my learners to forget what we used to call the line item budget, which means people, rent, heat, all that. So what? So you're spending that money on that. What are you getting for that? Well, I don't know. Instead, I like what we call program budgeting. What is it going to cost you to do something? Right? What is it going to cost you to open the store in St. Louis? Now that will include people, transportation, facility costs, and so on, but it is linked to something so where you can decide whether or not to do it. And you've got to learn to do that. Take a look at your own household budget. I used to laugh when all those girls were at home and I would go to a grocery store. I'd have a bill of, let's say, $106, and I had 2 carts of stuff there, and you couldn't eat about half of that stuff. There'd be magazines and makeup and hairspray and feminine products. I mean, just all shampoos by 4 or 5 kind and conditioners, Those weren't groceries. That shouldn't be in the grocery budget. So I changed the budget at our house between nutrition and appearance. How much are you spending to change the way you look? Right? We still have a funny thing that goes on in my house. My wife says, I'm going to get a haircut. I know this is a $70 or $80 trip. My barber's name is Willard Zach. And I said, well, go over to Willard. He'll cut it for $14. As a matter of fact, last time I was in there, he said I owed him $60 because he knew you were paying $70. Right? And so we talk about nutrition versus appearance. Well, it's the same thing in the workplace. What are you spending? On what are you spending your money? What are you getting for the expense? What are you getting for your expense? Boy, going to a university, the student has a right to ask that of every class, of every lecture. What am I getting for what's costing me? One of the reasons that online education grew so fast is there's no gasoline expense. There's no babysitting expense. For working adults, online education is wonderful. You don't have to drive, you don't have to pay to park, you don't have to buy a parking sticker, you don't have to get a babysitter, you don't have to eat cafeteria food. You can sit at home in your pajamas and work right there, save all that money. So what are you spending the money for? A program budget, and that is part of strategic thinking. So when you look at your life, think about that vision. Think about your goals and objectives. And then the milestones to do that. And then the tactic, how are you really going to do that? How are you going to make that happen? I hear lots of people tell me, I'm going to do this. And so how are you going to do that? I've had learners say, well, we're going to have this big 5-bedroom house with 4 kids out in the country, about 20 acres, and we're going to have some horses. And I said, what's your major? And she said, social work. I said, honey, you're taking one of the lowest paying jobs in America. I hope you marry well, because to do all of that, have you priced it out? Let's get real, I guess, is the discussion. And that's serious strategic thinking. That's thinking like the Buddhist koans, as I told you. Right? Learn to think, and to think harder. Thank you.